They tried to destroy my wedding in front of everyone, but just 5 minutes later, my name is Elena Petrescu, and until the day my wedding almost fell apart, I believed that patience, honesty, and love could fix almost anything. I worked as a museum conservator in Brașov, Romania, restoring old paintings that most people thought were beyond saving. Every tiny crack, every faded color, every damaged canvas told a story. I loved bringing those stories back to life. My grandfather always said, "If you can restore forgotten art, you can also build a beautiful life." I believed him with all my heart. I also believed love worked the same way. Didn't have to be perfect. It only needed two people willing to protect it. 3 years earlier, I met Mihai Ionescu at a small charity event where I was helping organize an art exhibition. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was calm, thoughtful, and had the kind of smile that made every difficult day feel a little easier. He worked as a landscape architect and spent his days designing parks and gardens that brought people together. We became friends first. Then those long conversations turned into dinners, weekend trips, and dreams about building a future together. When he asked me to marry him, I didn't hesitate for even a second. I thought I had found the person I would grow old with. The wedding day finally arrived after months of planning. It was a beautiful spring afternoon. The ceremony was being held in a peaceful garden filled with white flowers, green trees, and soft music. Everything looked exactly the way we had imagined. Friends and family were laughing, taking pictures, and telling us how happy we looked. I remember standing in a small room before the ceremony, looking at myself in the mirror. My hands were shaking not because I was scared but because I was excited. This was the beginning of the life I had dreamed about for so long. My parents had passed away years earlier, so the most important person beside me that day was my grandfather, Victor. He had raised me with kindness, wisdom, and endless love. Even though his hair had turned completely white and his steps had become slower over the years, he stood proudly beside me in his elegant suit. Before we walked toward the garden, he gently held my hand and smiled. "You look just like your grandmother did on our wedding day," he whispered. "She would be so proud of you." His words almost made me cry before the ceremony even started. I hugged him tightly, careful not to wrinkle my dress, and he laughed softly. "You've already fixed so many broken things in your life," he said. "Today you don't have to fix anything. Just be happy." I nodded, trying to hold back my tears. When the music began, everyone stood up. The garden looked like something from a dream. The flowers moved gently in the warm breeze. Sunlight shined through the trees, and every face was smiling as my grandfather and I slowly walked down the aisle. At the end stood Mihai, wearing a dark suit, smiling at me with tears already forming in his eyes. The moment our eyes met, nothing else seemed to matter. Every late night planning the wedding, every stressful decision, every challenge we had faced together suddenly felt worth it. I remember thinking, this is the happiest day of my life. Then everything changed. Just as my grandfather and I reached the altar, a chair scraped loudly across the ground. The sound cut through the music like a knife. Everyone turned. Mihai's older sister, Karina, stood up with a cold expression on her face. Her voice echoed across the silent garden. "Stop this wedding," she shouted. "Elena has been lying to all of us." The musicians stopped playing. The smiles disappeared. Every conversation ended instantly. Within seconds, dozens of phones were pointed at me instead of the flowers. Guests looked at me with confusion, curiosity, and suspicion. My heart began beating so fast I could barely breathe. I looked at Mihai, hoping he would laugh and tell everyone this was some terrible joke. But he didn't. He simply stared at his sister, then looked at me. And in that single moment, my perfect wedding turned into the worst day of my life. For a few seconds nobody moved. The entire garden was so quiet that I could hear the wind moving through the trees. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like everyone around me could hear it. Karina slowly walked toward the front of the ceremony with a thick folder in her hands. She looked completely confident, almost as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "I told all of you that this woman isn't who she pretends to be," she said loudly. "Now I have proof." She pulled out several printed bank statements and held them high so everyone could see them. These documents show that Elena has been secretly taking money from Mihai's accounts for months, she shouted. She doesn't love my brother. She only wants this family because of our money and our property. A loud wave of whispers spread through the guests. What? Is that true? I can't believe it. People who had been smiling at me only moments earlier were now looking at me like I was a stranger. Some even took out their phones and started recording. I could feel dozens of cameras pointed at my face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. What are those papers? Karina looked directly at me with a small smile that made my stomach turn. Stop pretending, she said. Everyone can finally see who you really are. She handed the papers to a few family members sitting in the front row. They looked through the pages one by one. Their faces slowly changed from confusion to disappointment. One of Mihai's uncles shook his head. I never expected this from you, Elena, he said quietly. His words hurt more than I could explain. I reached for the papers, but Karina quickly pulled them away. They don't belong in your hands anymore, she said. I looked at Mihai. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He just looked lost. His eyes moved from the papers to my face again and again, as if he didn't know what to believe. Finally, he took a slow step toward me. Elena, he said softly. His voice was almost a whisper. Please tell me this isn't true. That question broke my heart, not because he asked it, but because I could hear the doubt in his voice. I grabbed his hands. Mihai, listen to me, I said through my tears. I have never seen those papers before. I have never taken a single euro from you. I would never do something like that. You know me. He looked into my eyes, but before he could answer, Karina interrupted us again. She's lying, she shouted. That's exactly what a thief would say. Some guests nodded. Others looked away from me. A few people even stepped back as if I had become someone dangerous. I felt the ground disappearing beneath my feet. 3 years. 3 years of love, trust, and memories suddenly meant nothing. Nobody asked me for my side of the story. Nobody wanted to know the truth. The papers in Karina's hands seemed more believable than the woman standing in front of them. I looked around the garden. Only a few minutes earlier, these same people had been clapping, smiling, and celebrating our future. Now they were whispering my name with suspicion. I could hear pieces of their conversations. Maybe she planned this from the beginning. I always thought she was too perfect. Poor Mihai. Every sentence felt like another knife in my heart. Tears rolled down my face, but I didn't even try to wipe them away anymore. I wasn't crying because people were accusing me. I was crying because the people I loved were willing to believe the worst about me without giving me even one chance to defend myself. For the first time in my life, surrounded by hundreds of people, I felt completely alone. I slowly looked down at my wedding dress. Only minutes earlier, it had made me feel like the happiest woman in the world. Now it felt like I was wearing it at my own public humiliation. I took one deep breath, turned slightly toward the exit, and wondered if the only thing left to do was walk away from the wedding I had dreamed about for so many years. I wiped the tears from my face and took a slow step toward the exit. I couldn't stay there another second. If the man I loved wasn't sure whether he could trust me, then there was nothing left to say. Just as I started walking away, I felt a gentle hand on my arm. It was my grandfather. He looked at me with the same calm smile he had given me before the ceremony. Don't leave yet, Elena, he said softly. Give me 5 minutes. Then he turned to the guests. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone heard him. I am asking all of you for just 5 minutes, he said. If, after those 5 minutes, you still believe my granddaughter is guilty, she and I will leave quietly. But if you truly care about the truth, then stay where you are. The garden became completely silent. Nobody moved. Even Karina looked surprised. My grandfather slowly walked toward the large screen that had been prepared to show our wedding photos later that evening. He took a tablet from his jacket, connected it to the screen, and pressed a few buttons without saying another word. The screen came to life. This recording is from the security cameras inside my office, my grandfather said calmly. It was taken 4 days ago. Everyone looked up. The video showed the hallway outside his study. A few seconds later, Karina appeared on the screen. She looked around carefully to make sure nobody was watching. Then she quietly opened the office door and walked inside. A wave of whispers spread through the guests. Karina's face immediately turned pale. That's not what it looks like," she stammered. Nobody answered her. The next camera showed the inside of the office. Everyone watched as Karina opened my grandfather's filing cabinet and pulled out several financial folders. She sat at his computer, copied documents, changed numbers on the screen, and printed new pages. I covered my mouth in shock. I had never seen those papers before. Now everyone could see exactly where they had come from. The garden was so quiet that all anyone could hear was the sound from the video. But my grandfather wasn't finished. He calmly pressed another button. "This is another recording from the same day," he said. Second video appeared. It showed Karina using her phone to send the fake bank statements to her own email before printing them. There was no doubt anymore. Every page she had waved in front of the guests had been created by her. People who had been whispering about me only minutes earlier slowly turned toward Karina. This time nobody was looking at me. They were looking at her. Then my grandfather took one final step forward. "I have one last piece of evidence," he said. He pressed play on an audio recording. Karina's voice filled the entire garden. "If this wedding happens," she said, "I lose my chance to control the family estate. Elena has to disappear before it's too late." The recording ended. Complete silence. Nobody whispered. Nobody moved. Felt like the whole world had stopped breathing. The same faces that had judged me only moments before were now staring at Karina in complete disbelief. And for the first time since this nightmare had begun, I realized something. The truth hadn't just arrived. It had arrived at exactly the right moment. For a few long seconds, Karina stood frozen. She looked around the garden, hoping someone would defend her. Nobody did. The confidence she had shown only minutes earlier completely disappeared. Her hands began to shake, and she slowly stepped backward. Then she suddenly turned and tried to run. Before she could reach the gate, two of Mihai's cousins stepped in front of her. "You're not leaving," one of them said firmly. Several other relatives gathered around, making sure she couldn't escape. The entire garden was silent. Nobody was looking at me anymore. Every eye was fixed on Karina. I turned toward Mihai. He was standing exactly where I had left him, but he looked like a completely different man. His face was full of regret. Tears filled his eyes as he slowly walked toward me. When he finally reached me, he couldn't even look at me at first. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. His voice was shaking. "I failed you, Elena." He finally looked into my eyes. "I should have trusted you. I should have stood beside you instead of questioning you. I let you face all of this alone." I could see how deeply he regretted what had happened. He reached for my hand but stopped halfway, unsure if he even deserved to hold it. Meanwhile, the rest of the family surrounded Karina. One of Mihai's uncles held up the fake bank statements. "Tell us the truth," he demanded. "Right now." Karina looked around one last time, searching for a way out. There wasn't one. Her shoulders dropped. "I never wanted things to go this far," she said quietly. Nobody answered. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "I planned everything." A loud gasp spread through the guests. She admitted that she had secretly entered my grandfather's office, copied important files, changed financial records, and created fake bank statements to make me look like a thief. Then she revealed the real reason. "I knew that once Mihai got married, I would lose my influence over the family business," she admitted. "I was afraid I would no longer control the decisions, or the inheritance." She looked at me for the first time since the truth came out. "I thought if everyone believed you were a liar, the wedding would be cancelled forever." Her words hit everyone like a storm. She had tried to destroy my life simply to protect her own position. Instead, she had destroyed her own future. Mihai's uncle slowly shook his head. "You didn't just betray Elena," he said. "You betrayed this entire family." Several relatives immediately announced that Karina would no longer be involved in any family business decisions. Others said they would meet with their lawyers as soon as possible. My grandfather calmly explained that forging financial documents and creating fake evidence were serious crimes, and he had already saved every recording from his security system. Corina lowered her head. For the first time that day, she had nothing left to say. The lies she had carefully planned for weeks had fallen apart in only a few minutes. And the woman who had tried to ruin my wedding had lost everything she had been trying so desperately to protect. For a long moment nobody spoke. The guests were still trying to understand everything that had just happened. Only a few minutes earlier, they had believed I was a thief. Now they knew I had been the victim all along. Then my grandfather looked around the garden with a gentle smile. He cleared his throat and said, "Well, shall we continue the wedding?" A few people smiled through their tears. Someone started clapping. Then another person joined. Within seconds, the entire garden filled with applause. The musicians looked at each other and slowly began playing the wedding music again. It sounded even more beautiful than before because this time everyone knew the truth. I turned toward Mihai. He slowly walked closer until he was standing right in front of me. Without saying a word, he went down on one knee. At first, I thought he was going to ask me to marry him again. But instead, he lowered his head. "I'm not kneeling because I want another proposal," he said quietly. "I'm kneeling because I owe you an apology." His voice was filled with emotion. "When you needed me the most, I let doubt speak louder than love. I should have trusted your heart before I trusted a piece of paper. I can never take away the pain you felt today." Tears rolled down his face. "Whether you forgive me or not is your choice. I understand if you need time, but if you give me another chance, I promise I will spend the rest of my life earning back your trust." The entire garden became silent again. Everyone waited for my answer. I looked into his eyes for a long time. I remembered the happy moments we had shared over the last 3 years. I also remembered the pain of standing alone while everyone believed I was guilty. Trust is not something that returns in a single moment. It takes time. But I could also see that his regret was real. Slowly I reached out my hand. He looked up in surprise. I smiled through my tears. "This isn't the end of our story," I said softly. "It's the beginning of a stronger one. But from today we build it with complete honesty." He gently took my hand, and together we walked back to the altar. This time, every person watching understood how quickly lies could destroy lives and how powerful the truth could be. Our vows felt even more meaningful than they had before. When we finally said, "I do," the guests cheered louder than ever. Many people were crying. Others came to hug me and apologize for judging me without knowing the truth. I accepted their apologies, not because I had forgotten what happened, but because I didn't want bitterness to follow me into my new life. As Mihai and I walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, I realized something I will never forget. The wedding everyone believed had been destroyed became the day that changed every person who witnessed it. And I learned that justice doesn't always take years to arrive. Sometimes all it takes is 5 unforgettable minutes for the truth to change everything forever.